Good morning, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom to the 12 tribes of Israel, scattered abroad, and believers in Yeshua Messiah. Welcome to Hidden Manna. I am Pastor Dave Sains, Senior Shepherd at Living Manna Church. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on this Shabbat morning. We've got a neat conversation for you today. It's going to be part 2 of what we started last week, and that is defending the truth, talking a little bit about some of the information that is coming out there, videos and stuff, sort of refuting the concept or the idea of what we would call Hebrew roots or walking in Torah, or it's got so many different names. Trying to live out the Bible the way Yah has asked us to. And so to do this, of course, you know, my dear brother is with me, Brother Max. Good morning, man. How are you?
Good morning. Shabbat Shalom, man. How you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm tired. I'm tired today, man. I'm tired. I'm hurting. My back hurts. I'm just tired, man. It's one of those days you got to, like, pick yourself up and drag yourself to go do it, you know?
Yeah, I hear it. Last night I ended a little bit early on the Zoom.
Yeah, we saw you cut out.
And then my allergies, man. I'm telling you, last night I get off the Zoom call, I went inside and, you know, got in my seat, relaxed a little bit, watched a movie. Olivia finally got to watch a movie we wanted her to watch for a while. Didn't realize how bad it was, you know, when you don't see a movie for a long time. Yeah. Anyway, and then all of a sudden my nose got stuffy, my eyes were watering. I'm like, oh my goodness, no. I woke up this morning pretty good. Just my allergies have been rough this year.
Yeah, you've always had bad allergies. You've always had bad allergies.
Well, it's seasonal, right? Sometimes I'll have a year with nothing, and then a year where it's just like, oh man. But like I said, I'm here. Praise Yah.
We're here. We had a good conversation last night. It was fun. It's good to see everybody. Certainly, we want to lift up Sister Crystal and Richard. You know, they're going through COVID again. Yeah, so we want to keep them in prayer, and Sister Paula, of course, she just had her surgery. I haven't talked with her. I got some text from her son, but she's recovering. So definitely, keep her in prayer. Keep Sister Ali in prayer, and Brother Dave, of course, Sister Karen. Oh my goodness!
And
this goes
also
on and on. Brother Che.
Keep Sophia also in prayer. Our town, our local town, on July 31st is actually going to be having like a benefit dinner at one of the restaurants because the oncurring costs are hitting the family really hard. Their daughter has cancer, 11 years old or 12.
Oh my goodness.
So just again, keep them in prayer as well.
Yeah, so we lift up all of that, Father. We ask that your hand be on it. You lead and you guide your people, and open up our minds and our hearts today as we open up your word. Speak to us, we ask, in Yeshua's name. All right, so this is part 2. We started this last week. It's a video that's called "Problem with the Hebrew Roots Movement," and there's a lot of them, right? We just picked one because it was short, and we're going to sort of critique it as it goes through. We're going to watch a small part of it today. We're not going to watch the whole thing. We did already last week. And really, I guess what I, even though, this is obviously we're just two guys having a conversation, my hope, though, is that as we have this conversation, that we can help other brethren be able to give a defense of their faith, to understand in a very simple but very concise way what the truth actually is, and of course, looking at it from the Scripture. Because we're all faced with these questions, right? We get them from family, from friends, and honestly, if we're real honest with ourselves, we all ask these questions.
Yeah.
Right. I remember asking these. I remember thinking that way before, and thinking, oh my goodness, this is what it means. Until finally one day you're like, oh no, that's not.
Well,
what
it's like me and you brought it up right 5 minutes ago when you were queuing up the video for this morning. And on accident, I called the guy an idiot, and then I realized, no, he's not an idiot. He's just ignorant to the truth. There's a difference.
Yeah, I guess probably calling people names like that's not a good thing.
It's not
who we are.
Not gonna make disciples.
It's not who we are. This was a private conversation, but no, and I don't blame them. That's what they've. That's kind of what people have been told. We were there. We were all there. Yeah. And but this is the process we all go through, right? This is the winds and the waves and the sifting of the wheat and the chaff being this is that process each one of us are going through. And not everybody makes it through the sifting process.
That's right.
And some do, and thankfully, at least at this point, we have, and we hope others do. So, without further ado, I'm gonna play just a small portion of it, maybe a minute, and then we're gonna come back and talk about it. So let me do this. And if I lose you, I'll get you back, because I don't know why, but every time I put this on, I lose you. But I'll get you back. Here we go.
All right.
History. Some of this rationale comes from statements from Jesus, like in Matthew 5:17, that says, "Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill." And then they pair it up with John 14:15, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." But we know that in 1 John 5, it says that God's commandments are not burdensome. Jesus tells us in John 15 that if we keep his commandments, we will abide in his love. And in verse 12, he tells us his command, and that's to love each other as he's loved us. If we go back to Matthew 5:17 and look at how Jesus fulfilled the law, he did this by living a sinless life, as shown in 2 Corinthians 5:21, and dying as the ultimate sacrifice. He became our Passover lamb and canceled the debt for our sin by nailing it to the cross. That's why Paul could say that if we are saved by faith, we are no longer under the law. And we see this in Romans and in Galatians.
Okay. Now, I think I probably lost you, but give me a second, and I will get you back up.
There you go.
There we go. All right, you're back in. Okay, so we only wanted to do that small little portion, and because there's a lot to talk about there. You know, in the beginning of the video, he kind of actually did a fairly decent job describing truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he pulled out some good verses, John 14:15, John 5:17, which again he uses here. However, I wanted to pick this up from where, because he uses John 14:15 and then John 5:17 with the master, where we just read, "I have not come to abolish the law," saying that this is what people of the way, because really that's what we are, right? We are people of the way. Ultimately, if there is any name, there's only two names that I would think are biblical, and that is the Nazarene, and that is the way. Now, I know in Acts it says that at Antioch, at least when we read it in our English Bibles, at Antioch was the first time that they were called Christian. No, it's at Antioch was the first time they were called Messianics.
Yeah, in the scriptures version, it lays that out. Yeah.
So it's not what everybody is. When you read it in the English, you're assuming, oh, they were just like us, way back then. No, they were Messianics. Mm-hmm. And of course, that word Messianics and Christian become a synonym, but then there's just a divergence of truth that goes on from that point forward to where we are today. However, and here's what he says. So he goes through John 14:15, 5:7, that this is what they think, that he's talking about the law. But then he says, but we know. I don't know if you guys caught that, but there comes a point where he says, but we know, as to say, yeah, that's not really what it is about. Here's what we know. And the but what we know actually comes from 1 John chapter 5 and verse 3. And I'll pop it up here so we can all see it. Do I have it? I got 1 John 3. 1 John 5, sorry. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 3. And this should be familiar to us. We hopefully, we the people of the way are in the scripture. So verse 3 is obviously the verse that he quoted. And let's just read it the way he would quote it. For this is the love for Elohim, that we guard his commandments, and his commandments are not heavy. And I think he quotes King James Version or NIV or something like that, where it says, for this is the love of Elohim, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. Right. So, I mean, that's a fair translation. There's nothing, overtly wrong in that translation either way. But it's really, and he uses it as if to say, no, you don't have to keep the commandments because they are burdensome. That's the but he's making, and we got to think about this critically and listen carefully to what's being said. So he's using a verse that, if you actually read verses 1 through 3, say, everyone who believes that Yeshua Messiah has been born of Elohim, and everyone who loves the one bringing forth, meaning Father, also loves the one having been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of Elohim, when we love Elohim and keep his commandments. So whose commandments is he referring to? Elohim's commandments. Where are Elohim's commandments? They're everywhere, right?
Yep.
From Genesis all the way to Revelation, really. And then this verse, for this is the love of Elohim, that we guard his commandments, and that his commandments are not heavy. So there's two really, really important points just in the misuse of this verse, the way that he misused it, because he's misusing it as to say that since the commandments are burdensome, Messiah's death on the cross is so that we do not have to keep that burden.
And
that
ironically,
heavy burden.
that quote is right out of Deuteronomy too.
What's that, brother?
That quote that the Torah is not too burdensome is right out of Deuteronomy.
You're right. You're right. It's not up in the skies. So but again, part of it is, as I think we said last week, most people don't read their Bibles. Over 90% of people, that claim some sort of faith, they don't read their Bible, so they don't know what's in the Bible. So so somebody like this, puts out those verses, and the guy did a decent job with the video production. It's neat, it's clean, it's short. You could look at that and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But no. When you really start to critically analyze this thing, no, it doesn't make sense, because you're saying the opposite. And so here's the issue for me. When it says that this is the love of Elohim, we'll deal with the love of Elohim, because I think in the next couple of verses is when he says, well, here's the commandment. Here's what we're actually supposed to keep. Love him. Right? So love then is the commandment. And I can get sort of where you can come to that conclusion, because, we are told what's the greatest commandment. Love Yah. Love your neighbor. But this is telling us what love actually looks like. Because if you love your Elohim the way Messiah is talking about, and I think it's Matthew 22 or 23 maybe, I forgot wherever it is. Somebody could look that up. He's telling us, if you say you love him, you'll keep his commandments, because those two go hand in hand. They're not separate. But this idea of the burden, because again, this is just this is the religious way of thinking. Messiah has come, right? He dies on the cross. He dies on the cross so that we don't have to carry that heavy burden of keeping the commandments. And he is sinless in doing that. He doesn't sin. And because he doesn't sin, he fulfills the commandments for us. Now, that's not, I get why people might think that, but the truth of the matter is he does live a sinless life, first of all, to be the Passover lamb, right? He's got to be spotless, without wrinkle. That's A. But put that aside just for a second. Why does Messiah live the way he lived? As a human being, and that's the real issue here. He doesn't do this as eternal Elohim. He does this as human being, as man, as second Adam. He does this as flesh. So the question is, did he do it so that we don't have to do it? Or did he do it because we weren't doing it? How many times do we read throughout all of the Torah and the Tanakh where Yah is all over them because they would not keep his commandments. I mean, over and over and over. Every one of the prophets go through that, just, over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's what Yeshua tells them in Matthew 23. When they sit in the seat of Moses, do what they say, but don't do what they do outside, because they're hypocrites. They didn't follow the Torah correctly. They would teach it, right, on Shabbat, sitting in that seat, but they didn't live it. They didn't understand it. They didn't do it.
So there is no earthly example yet of what it looks like to keep God's law, because there really isn't anybody who's fully done it. So Messiah doesn't keep. Yes, he keeps God's law to be that perfect lamb, but he also keeps God's law via or through the Spirit of Elohim. Of course, he receives it without measure, as an example to us that this is what it looks like when you keep the law. And those are two totally opposing statements. One saying, well, he kept it so that you don't have to. The other meaning, no, he kept it to show you how. Yeah. To show you that it is possible. And I think
that's the irony. I'm sorry to cut you off, buddy. That's the irony in when he reads not to abolish but to fulfill. Those next following verses, literally, what is Yeshua doing? You have heard, it says, do not commit adultery. But I say, even if you look upon a woman with, you've committed it. So he's showing us how to live the Torah.
And even in the language that he uses in Matthew 5:17, because we talked about this a little bit last night at the Zoom call, he says, and if you listen carefully, he's telling them, don't think I came to destroy the Torah. I didn't. So whatever else he's going to say after this, he's not destroying the Torah. But when he does say, but to fulfill it, of course, again, the sort of religious way of thinking is, okay, fulfilled, complete, done, no more. It's past. That's not what it means. It means the story. Everything the Torah said about him, everything, the testimony of the law and the prophets, all of that testimony was about to be fulfilled. He was going to live it. He was going to give the Torah meaning in his life, but also he is the very topic of the Torah. So if you get into a discussion with someone, that's a major point to make with people. Just because it is fulfilled, it just means that the story that it was telling, the purpose of that story is now standing in front of them. And I think I mentioned this. I don't know if it was on Wednesday or last week. What is it? Romans chapter 10. It tells us that Messiah is the goal of the Torah. He's the purpose of it. So why do you do it? Why did we learn it? Why did all the prophets write it down? Because that was the testimony so you would recognize him when he comes. Well, they didn't recognize him when he came, but he fulfilled everything that was said about him. Everything we need to know about Messiah, we now know. We can know the prophets, or we can know. We can know the prophets. We can read it. So
and let's logically think too, right? Why would Yeshua, teach us how to live, right, in instruction till the cross or to the stake? Then from there on, you don't got to do it. Whatever I taught you, forget about it. It was only for that short period while I was here.
No, it does. It's not only does that not make sense to me, just as a human being, as an intellectual thinker, but that is not consistent with everything else the rest of the Bible has said.
That's right.
And we know that Yah is the same, right? His Father is the same. He doesn't change.
That's right. His word is established in the heavens. Yeah.
Yeah. He's had one plan forever, and so the idea that now I'm not saying that the plan doesn't unfold and become bigger and more amazing. Yes, it does, but it doesn't change. The core of what it is doesn't change. And here's Matthew chapter 11. And let's, I want to look at a couple of verses. Let me see, I had this down here. Verse 25. This is an important set of verses for understanding this idea of the burden. Because when modern religion says burden, they're thinking about like the commandments, that the commandments are a burden. When in all reality, the burden wasn't, well, I can't say the burden wasn't the commandments, because the commandments are a burden. There is a burden to carry. And that's the thing, because we're telling people, well, there is no more burden. No, what he's telling us is there is no more heavy burden.
Yep.
But,
light and easy. Yeah.
But there is a burden, right? There is something you're supposed to do. Or else it just doesn't make sense. The master says, to count the cost. Before you do this, before you really commit and understand, count the cost. Well, why would he be saying to count the cost? He's implying there's a what? A cost.
Yeah.
And there is a cost. And here it is in Matthew chapter 11 and verses 25 through 30. I'll just highlight if I can. Let me pop this up. Matthew 11 and verse 25, this is Yeshua speaking to Father about how this thing has unfolded. He says, I thank you, Father, master of the heavens and earth, because you have hidden these matters from clever and learned ones and have revealed them to babes. So he's talking about the difference between the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sadducees, right? They're the learned ones. And what have they created amongst themselves? A religion that is a burden. Messiah tells us this in Matthew 23. You go out to the world to gain one convert, and you just you put heavy burdens on the people. That's the burden the Scripture's talking about, which is not the Torah. It is the way in which Torah was implemented. It was what the vehicle that they were using Torah for was never the vehicle that it was intended for. The Torah was never intended to be the vehicle by which you get Yah's grace. That's wrong. And we know this is wrong right from the beginning, because this is the argument that Saul makes in Romans and Galatians and others concerning Abraham. He says Abraham was the example. It's always been by faith first. Abraham believed Yah, and it was credited to him as righteousness. The Jews created this religion that became it wasn't just the burden of things you've got to do in Yah. It was a heavy burden, unmeetable, undoable. So the master says, verse 26, yes, Father, because so it was well-pleasing in your sight. All have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, nor does anyone know the Father except the Son, and he to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. And that's a whole message by itself right there. The only reason you know Father, the only reason we know Father, is because the Son has allowed us, given us the ability to understand who he is. But these are the verses. Everybody knows them, but not a whole lot of people understand the truth of what's being said here. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened. Again, who's he speaking to? Israel, Judah. He's speaking to the religion of their day that is a burden. It is a heavy burden to them. Come to me, all you who labor who are labor and are burdened, and I shall give you rest. And here it is. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble, and you shall find rest for your beings or your soul. And verse 30, for my yoke is gentle and my burden is light. So it's not that there's not a burden.
Yep.
Right? It's not that there isn't something required of us. It's just that it's not what the Pharisees were telling you.
Exactly.
All right? So there is a burden. And of course, this is just, sort of skirted right over by the author of that video. But it's just amazing. He says, yeah, but we know, as if to say, yeah, this is the truth. And it's not if you critically look at it with the totality of Scripture. It's just it's just not the truth. And then, of course, as
Yeah.
we said, the second part of it is, well, how do you love God? Because you've heard this, man. We've both heard this. How many times? How many times have
Oh my
people that
goodness,
we
yeah.
know,
Just
that we've had discussions, if not arguments with, at times, and said, yeah, but all Yeshua said to do was to love one another. Really? First
Yeah.
of all, if that's the measure, we are failing as a culture, as a people, as a church. We are failing miserably.
Yep.
Absolutely miserably. If that's the standard.
The standard, yeah. Well, I was going to say that actually sets it up. I don't know if you want to go there right now, but also in the video, he said that the disciples didn't live in obedience to the Torah, right? In the beginning, he said
Yeah, he
that
does- he
Yeshua
does
and the
make that
disciples
contrast.
didn't, and
But the way that he says it is like, this is what they, meaning the people of the way, Hebrew roots, whatever you want to call them, this is what they think that his disciples all lived according, as if to say, no,
nope, yeah,
no, they didn't do that. They were New Testament, church people. No, they weren't. You got some verses for that. Shoot them to me. What do you got?
Let's do Acts 24:14.
It's so funny. When I first came here to Shepherd, we used to be in Wading River, way out on Long Island, and I had my Long Island accent, and I still do. Obviously, it's still there, but I used to say the Book of Acts, and it's just I just heard you say it because it just reminded me. But somebody mentioned to me, are you saying Acts like AX, like we're gonna chop something up? It's Acts. But my Long Island accent is turn to the Book of Acts, which is kind of rough. Acts chapter what?
As I'm drinking my coffee.
My coffee.
Acts 24:14.
My coffee.
Those fours are sounding real strong right now. 24:14.
14. That's right. You sure it's not verse 33? All right, so here we go. Here is Acts, or Ma'aseh. How's that? Here is Ma'aseh,
Yep.
chapter 24, and
When Paul
and
comes
verse
back
14.
with the other apostles. Go ahead.
Yeah, Acts. Well, here it is. What? Just verse 14. Yeah, I guess verse 14.
Yeah, and then I got
encompasses it.
some Acts
right.
20, couple in Acts. Go ahead.
All right, so it says, so this is Saul, and this I confess to you, that according to the way. So there it is. That's what did they call themselves in the first century? The people of the way. And more specifically, what it means to be called people of the way is obviously because Yeshua says, I am the way, right?
Yep.
The truth and life. But it's beyond that, because what Yeshua is actually saying, there was already an acknowledgement of what the way was. The way was going past or entering into the temple through one entrance and making your way through the temple or the tabernacle into the place where your offering could be brought into the Holy of Holies. It was the approach for the tabernacle. It was the outside gate going into the courtyard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's why he used the reference that there's only one way into the sheep gate,
Right.
through right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're a robber.
Right. So this wasn't a new term. This wasn't like something, Yeshua just started or Saul starting. He is saying the way to the Holy of Holies, which is exactly what Hebrews tells us, right? Right? That the way has been made through his flesh was the veil. Now we have access. So when he says we are the people of the way, he's quite literally saying the way to the Holy of Holies. And who is that way? Yeshua is that way. So that according to the way, which they call a sect, so I worship the Elohim of my fathers. And here it is. Here's Saul, first century, as well as all the other disciples, believing all that has been written in the Torah and in the prophets. They didn't reject it. They didn't turn it away. They didn't say it's done. It's not here anymore. Give me another one.
Acts 21, 21 through 24. Or Acts.
Ma'aseh. Ma'aseh 21 and what verse?
21 through 24.
All right. So it says, again, more of Saul's testimony.
Which is great because everyone tries to use Saul to, for the opposite. So,
excuse me. Verse 21 says, but they have been informed about you, meaning Saul, that you teach all the Jews who are among the nations to forsake Moses, saying not to circumcise the children, nor to walk according to the practices. What then is it? They shall certainly hear that you have come. So do this, that we say to you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take them and cleanse them, be cleansed with them, and pay their expenses so that they shave their heads. And all shall know what they have been informed about you is not so, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the Torah. There it is. There it is. That's a big one. And to sort of piggyback off of that, because later on he said, we as far as the circumcision, we gave the Gentiles, we told them to do A, B, C, and D. And that gets so confusing to people because it seems like they're telling the Gentiles to do something else, but in fact, the A, B, and C that they tell the Gentiles is all Torah. They didn't make up new rules for them, but the issue was, well, how do we bring these people in? And I heard someone else say this just recently. Another minister, another good Torah teacher, just a little bit different perspective on this. The Jews didn't want the Gentiles coming in.
Nope.
So let's say you have like this exclusive club that you only want certain people to be involved in. And now there's other people who you find unsavory at best, and you don't want them to come in. So how do you stop them from coming in? Well, you guys can come in if you get circumcised.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it from that perspective for a second. It's like, what? If I what? That's how I come in? And I after thinking from that perspective, you almost got to wonder, was the halakha that Judaism created to bring proselytes in, was it actually really created to keep them out? Right? To make this so stringent and difficult. And for the people that really, I guess, really did all of that and went through the whole halakha. Halakha just means, other laws, other rules that were made up. Then those people were sold, right? They bought it hook, line, and sinker. And so I think what's also going on here is, the disciples realize, man, we can't do that. We can't set that. We can't tell them they have to do that. That's not to say that they wouldn't learn that when they went to synagogue.
Yeah, and that's what it says in Acts 15.
And that they wouldn't, so long as they began living with the people of that synagogue who are also believing in Messiah, they're also learning, years go by, they have a child, they would have circumcised that child. And we know that as a point of history because there is historical records that the Netzarim, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 years after Messiah are doing exactly that. We're talking about people that came from the nations as well as those who were Jew were circumcising their children.
Yep.
All this is telling us this is just a snapshot of time, right? What we're reading here is a snapshot of what was going on at the time. And at the time, no, they don't have to do this. Let's start here. Start here. We'll get to that because that's the everlasting
I think we've
covenant.
all in our walk have done that, right? Started off with the Sabbath, or getting rid of celebrating pagan holidays. Yeah. Right. And then we started to eat clean, and then like you said last night, with the tzitzit, we didn't the first day literally just bam try to do everything and walk according, it would be kind of hard, right? It would be,
Yeah.
it's a timely process. And that's why in Acts 15, they say, let's start them off here with strangling blood, prostitution, blah, blah, blah. And then they said every week, right, every Shabbat, there's a synagogue basically on every corner. They'll learn Moses. They'll learn the Torah.
Moses. Yeah.
We see that with Timothy. Timothy was circumcised, right? Titus wasn't. He needed,
Right.
There was a timely process.
Yeah, it's crawl, a walk, run.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think one of the mistakes we've got to be careful not to make for those people that are already running is to try to impose upon people that are just starting to crawl, telling them, well, now you got to run.
Yeah.
Now you because what then does that become? Well, that becomes sort of a religious burden.
Yeah,
Learn.
right. And it's human nature, right? Because we forget where we started off. Now we know, and we want everyone else to know what we know, and what You're right. That's a good point. That really is a good point. So.
And it takes time, and it's not that the person that's running has ill will in their heart, because they want other people to understand
Just
the way they understand. They want people to walk in, but as from a shepherd's perspective, you got to feed the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we said last night. The quote. I got to put out a hashtag or something like this. The Torah is not just about doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's about
understanding.
It's about understanding, and so that's a big one. But he was keeping the Torah, no doubt. So so when you read Saul say, which is some of the verses that the gentleman in the video used after this, that we're not under the Torah, quoting Romans and Galatians. So if Saul is keeping the Torah, and he's they've instructed the even the Gentiles who are now coming in to do Torah, because everything in Acts chapter 15 is Torah. When he says honor your father and your mother, husbands, parents don't. I forget what the phraseology is, but don't push your kids. Kids obey your parents. Master, that's Torah.
Mm-hmm.
That's all Torah. There's nothing that's said that's not Torah. So if the way modern religion is looking at this and saying, well, there is we're not under the Torah, as to say it is no more, they're missing that everything that's being said is Torah. So our understanding is skewed here, and that's probably the issue on every place where it seems like there's a contradiction in Yah's word, because it seems like there's a contradiction. Why say that we're not under the Torah when in fact his testimony is I'm keeping the Torah. And we're instructing the Gentiles to keep Leviticus 17, 18, 19, to read,
and when they
to
tell
listen to
him
Moses.
to take those Gentiles, man, that was expensive, because they told him to pay for the Nazarene vow that he was doing with them.
That's
if you go to the Torah, you got to see what you got to bring to the temple, man.
Yeah,
that
it's
was going to be an expensive.
And so when we come up to a contradiction like that in Yah's word, or what is seemingly a contradiction,
it's our error.
It's our error, right? It's us, and you got to rethink it. So if he's saying we're not under the Torah, and I know we've said this before, and hopefully everybody knows this, what he's saying is the Torah is not the vehicle by which we gain salvation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's the vehicle by which we live out salvation, but it is not the vehicle by which we receive salvation. That was the problem of Judaism of the first century. That was the issue. And until you wrap your mind around that, until you can be an honest observer as to what the record is, and again, people don't read their Bibles, so how could they be?
Mm-hmm.
And then you hear stuff like, we just saw it in the video, but his law is a burden. And actually, I think later on in John there, he tells us Yah's instructions are not burdensome, not heavy, but they are a burden.
Mm-hmm.
There is a burden to care, and wonderfully, we don't carry it alone, because he says he yokes himself up with us.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, come on, we all face it. Just in little things in life, it's summertime. every festival in town that you would love to take the kids to go have a nice day is usually when? On Shabbat, which would be fine, but if there's a $10 admission and you're buying and selling, right? Or in our town there's a baseball team, a farm team, but to go see them they usually play Saturdays, and so some things like that, for the kids it's like, oh man, but so there is a light burden. There is some things that that you do come across that you're like, oh, it's Shabbat, but you know what? At the end of the day, I choose to be obedient to Yah.
Yeah, you've got to. You wind up having to change your lifestyle, and yes, it is a burden, but it's not a heavy one. It is maybe a little awkward at first when you're starting trying to do these things, and yet, we've also got to be intellectually honest with those people that we're trying to minister to, especially when it comes to the feast days and things like that. Things have changed. I'm not saying we don't celebrate them. We don't do our best to remember them. But there's no way to celebrate tabernacles.
Yeah. Actually, you know what, bro? Since you brought that up, why don't you bring up Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 5? Because that goes right along with what you're saying. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 6 through 8.
Here it is. Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the entire lump? Therefore, cleanse out the old leaven so that you are a new lump. You are unleavened. For also Messiah, our Passover, was slaughtered for us. So then let us celebrate the festival, the feast day, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So, there it is, where they're celebrating Passover. Yes. However, and again, we've got to be intellectually honest about this to explain this accurately to people. Can we do what they did today? No. There was still a temple there. You could still follow the instructions. That's the other thing that the guy did say.
Yes,
that I thought was sort of sneaky. And yet true, because he makes the statement that there is no place in the Bible where God tells the Gentiles to keep the Levitical law. That's what he says, to keep the Levitical law. And you know what? He's right. There is no place in the entirety of the Torah where, or the law, the prophets, the Brit Hadashah, where God tells the nations to keep Levitical law. The Levites were supposed to keep Levitical law. The instructions of righteousness were for everyone. And so it sounds like, maybe we're splitting hairs here. We're not, because Hebrews makes the whole big deal out of this, that the Levitical law has been displaced. The way in is not the Levitical law. The way in now to the Holy of Holies is, in fact, the way, Messiah. It's not blood of bulls and goats and so forth and so on. So we've got to be intellectually honest here and say, yeah, we're not really celebrating tabernacles. At least we're not doing it according to the instruction, according to the way we were told to do it, because it's got to be done in Jerusalem. It's got to be done with a temple. It's got to be done with that. That was the instruction. Well, those things aren't here anymore. So does that mean that we just toss them out? Well, no, they were celebrating it here. Colossians speaks about the same thing. Don't let people judge you as you're doing these things. Don't let the religious world judge you. So, when we're going to go to tabernacles, we're going to have our tabernacles thing. First of all, with the calendar that we try to keep, for us, tabernacles is like the week before. But we're doing this to fellowship, with other people. We're making it a week long. Because I know some people were a little concerned, do I travel on the high Sabbath? Well, technically it's not. But I know there's people that have different calendars, and so we're trying to be sensitive to that. But, from my perspective, tabernacles is like the week before. This is the week that we've got that we're going to celebrate it. We're going to memorialize it. We're going to teach. We're going to have a great time together. But am I actually celebrating tabernacles the way the instructions are given to us? No, I'm not. And we've got to be honest with that. But by the same token, Moses told us, because this goes all the way back to the beginning, that we were going to be scattered all amongst the nations, and at some point, Yah's people, their hearts are going to be turned back to his Torah.
Yep.
And that's why we're in the nations. That's when we are amongst all of stuff. And that's what's happening. Our hearts are turning back to it. We are the fulfillment of what Moses was talking about. And not just us, it's been going on for a long, long time. And so, we're turning back to it, but the temple's not there. None of that stuff is there. It will be there at some point one day, not by us, I think by the master. So, so we've got to be honest. So when we talk to people, we've got to be able to explain, that no, we can't do these things. Hebrews does say there is a change of that
necessity. Yeah.
There's a necessity, a change of the law. He means the Levitical law, that the purpose that it served is done. It was the teacher. It was the tutor. It is done. But that
and
doesn't
the cool
mean
thing is when
God's
you look it up even in the
instruction.
Strong's, it means transfer, which we know it goes right back to the order of Melchizedek. Yeah, back to the heavenly. Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got to be intellectually honest with that in speaking to people, because those are going to be the arguments that people make. Yeah, well, what do? Do you bring sacrifices? You can't bring sacrifices to a temple. Yeah, well, of course not. Of course we don't. There is no temple, but we've got to have a good answer for that. And we don't have to come up with one. It's in the book.
Yep.
It tells us. The whole book of Hebrews tells us. And yet in the whole book of Hebrews, all the examples he gives are Torah. So, yes, we're not under Torah as far as our, because what being under Torah means that your position is based on what you do. That's wrong. We are under grace. My position is based on what Yah has done. But now that I have position in him, now I need to walk it out. And again, what is the pattern? The Old Testament sacrifices. Yeshua is the Passover. He's the red heifer. And what's the pattern? Well, if you sinned, if you were unclean, if you were ceremonially dirty, that blood repositioned you in a way that you are now clean or in right standing with Father. So now what do you do after that? Well, you try to stay in that position. You live out. If you gave a sin offering for whatever the sin was, whatever dumb thing it was that you might have done, when you gave that sin offering, you didn't walk away from it thinking, okay, now I can go back and I can do it again. Or now the instruction doesn't it doesn't mean anything because I've already had the sin offering. That's why Messiah gives us all of those examples, because that's him. You can't come to him and say, okay, I believe now I'm not responsible for all those other things. No, that's not the pattern. The pattern is now I can, now that I'm in a right position, I want to, I desire to live those things out. So the words are tricky. You got to listen to it carefully. But I'm telling you, everything's there. Everything that we needed to know about who Messiah is there. What else we got?
I mean, we had we brought it up, what our title is, The People of the Way. Just a couple of more witnesses we'll give. Acts 22:4.
Acts?
Yeah, we'll go back to Acts.
Acts chapter 22 and verse 4. Actually, verse 3. I am a Jew, having been born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in the city at the feet of Gamaliel, having been instructed according to the exactness of the Torah of our fathers, being ardent, zealous for Elohim, as you all are today, who, and he's now giving his testimony, who, Paul, persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering up into prisons both men and women.
And then these two, this is when he's before Felix, real fast. 24, stay in Acts, chapter 24, verses 14 and 22. Because Felix even knew who they were.
Acts chapter what again, brother?
24.
24 and verse 42.
No, 14.
Oh, 14.
And verse 22.
Yeah, more of his testimony. And this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the Elohim of my fathers, believing all that has been written in the Torah and the prophets. And verse 22, it says, and having heard this, having known more exactly about the way, Felix put them off, saying, when Lysias the commander comes down, I shall decide your case. Again, more testimony that's what the name
there's
was,
some
the
more.
people
Acts
of the way.
9 verse 2, Acts 19 verse 9. We're just trying to. I'm looking at the time just for time's sake.
But the real, I think, the major error that we have is the difference between thinking Messiah came to fulfill the Torah so you don't have to, versus the idea that Messiah came to live the Torah to teach us how to.
Mm-hmm. Notice he didn't read the rest of the verse though.
Yeah.
Until heaven and earth. I mean, there was no other, because that would just cause more confusion for his case.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's tricky when people start pulling out just the little verses rather than the whole thing.
Now, hey brother, I got a lot of verses, but I think we went over it already enough for one law, for the Torah. We all know Numbers chapter 15, verses 14, 15, and 16.
Let me go there.
Just write that down. Yeah.
Numbers 14.
I want people to have this in their tool belt. Some verses, some scripture.
Verse what? Numbers 14?
Numbers 15, verses
15.
14, 15, and 16.
All right, hold on. I'm in the wrong one. Numbers 15, verse 14. And here it is. And when the stranger sojourns with you, and by stranger we mean Gentiles, right? The people of the nations, not native born. And when the stranger sojourns with you, or whoever is among you throughout your generations, and would make an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yah, as you do, so he does. One law is for you of the assembly, and for the stranger who sojourns with you. A law forever throughout your generations, as you are, so is the stranger before you. So, Yah always wanted his people to obey, all people to obey his instruction. But he didn't tell the Gentiles that they could be Levites.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't tell them they're going to do the offerings.
Yeah, because he said my house is a house of prayer for all people.
For all people,
right?
For all nations, right? So, it may sound like, aren't they really keeping Levitical law by bringing sacrifices? No, they're doing what all people were supposed to do. There was, the laws given to the Levites were not the same laws as given to, anybody else from any other tribe. You had certain requirements because you were a Levite. Just like the laws, and it would be ludicrous to say this, but do men follow all the laws that in the Torah that were given to women? Well, of course not. I mean, that's that's an obvious thing, or vice
versa. A farmer.
Or if you're a farmer versus a guy who's a salesman, has got some cart full of, there's laws that apply to you as to what you
which
would
you just
do.
brought up, because a Levitical priest wouldn't have to worry about farming.
Nope.
Yep.
So and it all comes down to not realizing that this is a single story.
That's right.
That this is a continuous, compounded instruction that needs to be consistent all the way through the book. And again, if there are inconsistencies, it's because we don't know the book. We haven't read the book. The inconsistency is us. But if you take time, if you really take time, if you really want to know, and I've met some great people within the church world, man, you could just tell they're going to get it. They're going to get it because they're reading, because they're looking, and they're coming up with all sorts of questions to try to stump you. But the more you search like that, The more you pursue, and honestly, you know what that does? That makes us better too. So don't be afraid out there, guys.
Oh, yeah.
For someone to to say, oh yeah, well, this is what you believe or this is what I believe. Be able to give an account. Don't shy away from that.
Yeah, I agree.
The truth is on your side.
That's right. I wanted to also just bring up, Mark chapter 2, verse 27, when Yeshua says that the Sabbath was made from man, right? Not the Jews, right? From man. You gonna pull it up, or do you want to?
Yep. I'm pulling it right now.
And then I got one more too. That I love this verse. It's one of my favorite, but the ending of it is what's key. So.
And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And you're right. He's talking about humanity. He's not talking about just the people of Israel. He's talking about all human. For Yah so loved the world. See, again, that's just another part of the story. We're going to go over this on Wednesday when we talk about what the truth is as opposed to kind of what we're hearing or what we've heard for 1700 years. And they've both been parallel. There's been always a group that has understood and pursued the truth, and then there has been the majority that has been doing just all sorts of other, religious things, because there is a beast, there is a false prophet out there who's been here for a long time. So these two stories run parallel to each other throughout history, and the trick is to not be tossed around by the winds and waves of one, and then learn the other one and walk that one. So we're going to talk about what the truth really is. But here's a big part of the truth. All of this, for Yah so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, to do what? To rejoin the two scattered houses. That's what all of this is about. That is one of the key purposes. That this is about regathering both houses, restoring them and making them one flock. We teach, and I know this may sound a little weird, but try to get what I'm saying. We teach everybody that if you accept the death and the resurrection, you are now going to heaven. Your sins are forgiven and you're now going to heaven. And we'll talk about that on Wednesday, all the details concerning that. But the truth is that if you do understand who he is and you do really pursue him, you will be grafted back into the house of Israel. Whether you're a sojourner or foreigner. See, that's not the message we've heard. We've been told, no, you're something different.
Yeah.
And that's a lie.
Yeah, that's why another homework would be Isaiah 56, right?
Love.
It talks about those. Yeah, that's
Isaiah
one of my
56.
favorite chapters.
One of my favorite chapters.
But real fast,
all he's doing is he's describing the story. The story doesn't change.
Exactly. And we've quoted this scripture, and everyone out there knows this one, Ecclesiastes 12:13. I just wanted to finish off with this because it's the last word in that I've even overlooked, because we just concentrate on the beginning of because that's what's so awesome. But look at what he says at the end. 12:13.
Here it is. And besides these, my son, be warned. The making of many books has no end, and much study is wearying of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Fear Elohim and guard his commandments, for this applies to all mankind. For Elohim shall bring every work into right ruling, including all that is hidden, whether good or whether evil. And, there's so much more to say about all of this, but, ultimately, what do you think every one of us are going to be judged by? You're when I say judged, we're going to be judged for reward or reward taken away, because we are already made right with the master. So we will be judged by reward and either receive reward or have reward taken away from us, dependent upon our understanding, our obedience, etc., etc., etc. Well, how will the rest of the world be judged? Well, if they're going to be judged by the Torah, if you're not standing in him already, the Torah will judge you. It will judge your works. It will judge what you have done, what you have not done. The whole world will be judged by the Torah, one way or the other.
That's it.
So good stuff. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
We'll see you a bunch of
good conversation, man.
Yeah, good
We got
conversation.
Paul being a wise guy. Can I ask you a question?
I like that, brother.
That's funny.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we got that Northeast accent. Well, listen, at least we didn't, say something like, it's the Tara. We're not from Boston.
Right? That's funny. That's good.
All right, brother. I give you the last word.
Well, love you. Everyone enjoy the Sabbath. And don't forget to keep all those people in prayer.
Yeah.
And that's it. Just enjoy the day. I love you, man.
You too, brother. I love you, man. Shabbat shalom.
All right. Shabbat shalom.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Nothing really hidden, revelational, but really important stuff that I hope we all get because sooner or later, at some point, you need to be ready to give an account of your belief, of your faith. And so that's what we're trying to help you do here. And to me, it's not surprising that more and more of these videos are coming out because more and more people, their eyes are starting to open. But guys, enjoy the rest of your Sabbath day. Don't forget to join us tomorrow morning for our teaching over the weekend, our weekend evangelism service. We got a really neat one. We're continuing in the truth of the Torah. We started talking about it a little bit last night. We're going to continue on it for tomorrow. It'll be very instructive, I hope. Guys, have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day today. God bless, guys, and Shabbat Shalom.